Let me just say this about the likely Democratic nominee. The notion that support for her would be a support for change is frankly laughable. She represents the views of this administration. She was a part of this administration. If the American public is happy with where we are at home, an average about 2% growth rate, a typical middle-income family $3,000 worse off now than when the president came to office, and if they're comfortable with America's current position of influence around the world, then maybe Secretary Clinton will win.
That, of course, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Welcome back to the Steve Malzberg Show. In case you're just joining, I'm Rick Unger. I'm filling in for Steve today. And joining us right now, the managing editor for the University of Virginia Center for Politics, and also the managing editor for Sabato's Crystal Ball. We're joined by Kyle Kondik. Kyle, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So listen, you wrote what I thought was a really interesting piece this week that I read in Politico entitled Clinton's Real Opponent, Barack Obama. I can come at that in very many ways, but you come at it in a fascinating way having to do with how the president's current lack of popularity will have an impact on Secretary Clinton if she's the nominee. You want to lay that out for us?
Yeah, sure. So historically, the approval rating of the sitting president has had a lot of bearing on how the election results turn out. In fact, Obama running for re-election in 2012, Gallup had his approval rating at like 51%, and that's exactly what he got in the actual election. And so, the approval rating is certainly a good proxy for how a sitting president will end up doing. But I think it's also important for the candidate who tries to follow that president from the same party, in this case, probably Hillary Clinton. If Obama is in the high 40s or even over 50, I think Clinton probably has a pretty decent chance to win. Obama's in kind of the mid to high 40s right now. But if Obama is lower than that, I think it becomes a heavier lift for Clinton. Well, and the other thing we found is that even though Obama's national approval rating is, again, in the mid to high 40s, in some really important states, Obama's approval rating is worse than that and worse than you might expect given the 2012 results.
I want to come back to the state issue because it's important, but you touched on something that has some historical context, and I'd like to get your take on that. We know that certainly in modern history, it is incredibly difficult for a candidate from the same party as the preceding president to be elected. In fact, I think the only time it's happened again in modern history was George H.W. Bush did follow the Reagan administration and only lasted a term. Many would say that we've hit this demographic point where the Democrats have such a lead in terms of the makeup of the voting population that it's going to be virtually impossible for Republicans to win the White House, maybe ever again. How do you compare that point of view to what you're saying, which is that a low Obama popularity level going into the next election would really hurt the Democratic candidate?
Well, this will be a great test because I think that if you look at kind of economic indicators and other kind of fundamental factors in the 08 and 12 elections and kind of political science models that use basic factors to try to explain who would win, those factors suggest that Obama would win in 08 and 12. What if we have a situation where economic forecasting models and that sort of thing suggest that the Republicans will win in 2016 and they don't? That would be an indication that to your point, maybe the demographics have become so challenging for Republicans that the old historical trends don't matter anymore, and they're just behind the eight ball and in losing the growing share of the electorate. And that's it. Again, this election will be a good test, but my thinking is that, and history tells us this, is that if the Republicans have a credible nominee and Obama's approval rating is maybe where it was around the 2014 election, I think Clinton's going to have a hard time winning regardless.
See, I think that to me is as a political scientist, if you will, is going to be one of the most interesting things that we may or may not see in this election, because we've been hearing for so long Republicans are through when it comes to the White House. Let's go back to what you had to say about the president's popularity in certain key states. Which states are you talking about?
there were two in particular that stood out, two smaller states that are typically very, very competitive and should be again in 2016, and that's Iowa and New Hampshire, which coincidentally happen to be the first two states in the presidential primary process. But Iowa and New Hampshire are both states where Obama's approval is basically worse than you'd think it would be, given the fact that Obama won both of those states in 2008 and 2012. And there are also states that are overwhelmingly white. And in Iowa in particular, there are a lot of what you'd call working class whites, which is a demographic that has swung away from the president and the Democrats over the course of his term. And if there's a erosion amongst Democrats with those voters in these key states that extends to someone like Hillary Clinton, then maybe that's a problem for Clinton, even if Obama is otherwise doing well nationally. And so, I remember in the 2012 election, close to election day, there was a real disconnect between the national polls, which suggested the presidential race was basically a tie, and some of the state level polls in places like Ohio.
I apologize. I got to catch up because we got to get going. I really do appreciate it, Kyle. You've given us a really fascinating metric that we can use in getting a sense of where we're at in the next election. So I really appreciate you joining us.
Hey, thank you.
See you again, man. Coming up next, more of the show. But first, if you are looking to get the most out of your food, this Max 2 Health Moment features dietitian Ryan Smith with information on 3 superfoods that may produce a far better human brain. Stay with us. You're going to like it.
Here's some food for thought. Studies show that nutrition affects brain development and function as people age. So what brain-boosting foods should you be adding to your shopping cart?
I think that avocado is a great one to incorporate in because it's high in monounsaturated fats, and it can help actually increase blood flow to the brain. I think that blueberries are very helpful as well. There's been lots of studies on blueberries. They have been known to reduce oxidative stress, and they can help reduce, possibly, Alzheimer's disease. And then lastly, I would say omega-3 fats found in fatty fish. Those also have been shown that they can possibly help prevent dementia, memory loss, and Alzheimer's disease.
If you're considering taking a multivitamin and a mineral complex supplement to help make a few of the essentials, talk with a local dietitian to see what works best for you.
The White House insists U.S. warships off the coast of Yemen are only there to keep commercial trade open. I'm Miranda Kahn. In this story tops your Newsmax Now update. Several reports contradict that statement, though, suggesting the ships are there instead to intercept Iranian vessels should they try to send weapons to the Houthi rebels in Yemen. Michelle Leonhard, the head of the DEA, may step down. This after reports claim agents had wild sex parties with prostitutes paid for by drug cartels. Protesters wrap up a 250-mile march from New York City all the way to Washington, D.C. The march is a demonstration against racial profiling and police brutality. And cable executives from Comcast and Time Warner are set to meet with officials at the Justice Department tomorrow. They want federal regulators to allow a $45 billion merger. That was your latest Newsmax Now update. Always stay connected with us at Newsmax.com.